My next guest is a Zen Buddhist monk, a former composer, a former mathematician from Cambridge. He's a former co-founder of Wake Up Movement, an organization dedicated to educate young people to meditate. Today, he's a leading voice in teaching applied mindfulness to climate activists, business leaders, artists, and scientists, and a monk. He's really passionate to bring to a more compassionate society as well as a collective awakening. And if you love what you hear, the knowledge bombs that he drops, go to plumvillage.org and Thich Nhat Hanh foundation.org/donate, because the monastery can always use your support. Please welcome Brother Spirit.
Thank you, CK. Thank you for your introduction. Very kind.
Thank you so much for being here. It's quite a privilege for us to connect. I have so many questions. I've done a lot of research. You're a fascinating man and a teacher. One thing that I'm curious about, since you were a householder and then you became quite active in providing and support in educating young people, and then you became a monk. Can you tell us a little bit about that transition going from being a householder and to be a full-time monk?
Sure. Yes. The first time I went to Plum Village was in 1999, and I was still a student at Cambridge, so I was 19. And I certainly had no intention of becoming a monk. I was just going kind of out of curiosity more than anything else. I think there was something pushing me unconsciously that I didn't realize until later, which is the loss of my mother. She had died about 18 months before, and I really had no way to deal with that loss. There was nothing. I had no practice, no tradition, no ceremony, no ritual, no way even just to comprehend it or to understand it. All I had was my kind of scientific training, which I had taken on as a young adult. As a teenager, I was kind of very much into science as a way of understanding the deepest questions. But I found that when faced with that, with the loss of my mother, actually science left me kind of high and dry. I didn't really know how to handle it. But if you'd asked me, when I first went to Plum Village, why I was going, I don't think I would have mentioned that, because I was so out of touch with myself and with my feelings that I wouldn't really even have known, what was really driving me. But I consider myself very fortunate to have found my way to Plum Village and to have had the opportunity there to find something very different from what I thought I was looking for. So what I thought I was looking for was a kind of, I guess, like altered states of mind, or, some kind of proof of something more than the material world. I thought I was going to get so I was going to be taught to levitate or get in touch with other dimensions. I don't know what I had all kinds of crazy notions. But I wanted proof that there was something more than just matter, just particles bouncing off each other infinitely.
So you had an idea back then, even you were a trained scientist. Okay, so you were just curious, and then this event that compelled you to go to Plum Village.
Yeah. There was a kind of question. It's like, is this all there is, or is there something more? And I thought, well, if there is something more, then maybe this guy called Thich Nhat Hanh is the one who would know. People say he's enlightened. So somebody just told me, like, there's this guy, he's enlightened. So I was like, okay, well, let's go and see what he has to say. We shouldn't miss that. We should at least check it out. And I was very surprised when I got to Plum Village. I came in the summer retreat, 1999. I was very surprised to find that he taught mainly about very, very, very simple things. mostly that I didn't want to hear about. I found it really frustrating. He kept talking about just breathing and bringing your awareness back to your body. He talked about your relationship with your parents and your ancestors and with Mother Earth. And it was very kind of like feet on the ground, very down to earth stuff. And I found it really, really annoying. And yet at the same time, like completely irresistible, because I kind of couldn't refute it. I really tried, I tried to refute pretty much everything he said, because that was my training, doubt, skepticism, question everything. So I was really trying, but I found like every single thing he said, I was like, yeah, that's true. Yeah, that too. Okay. It just went on and on. And at some point, I think I started feeling like there's something very special about this man, actually. And maybe he's the first real human being I've ever met.
Mm.
Just the way he moved, the way he would pour himself a cup of tea, the quality of his presence, like the power of it. It was just such a kind of fact. There was just the fact of him, the fact of his presence. It was so intense in a way that I felt, I'd had wonderful teachers at Cambridge, Nobel Prize winners and Fields medalists and all kinds of, amazing people. But they always seemed a little bit distracted or only half there, compared to him. And they might have been brilliant in their field, but I sort of questioned them as a whole human being. They didn't seem to have what he had, which was this kind of depth of compassion, of presence, of wisdom. And so I was like, okay, so what is this about? Is it real? I was still kind of fighting it, at some level. After the end of so I stayed 4 weeks, and after the end of the retreat, I went away, and the retreat.
Before you go on, actually, I wanted to, if you can contextualize that a little bit more, because what you're talked about is, so here's some questions thrown your way, right? Is it charisma? Is it some, ESP power that he has, right? Some guruship that he's trying to interact with his students, or, just contextualize that dimensional of the depth of presence that you talk about, because I think that would give people a flavor of what could be, what's possible, in a grounded way, but yet in a very present way. If you can say a little bit more about that, that'd be amazing.
I guess there was something about just the way he did everything, even very simple things. So like in the middle of a talk, he might stop, and without hurrying, just really taking all his time, he had a little teapot next to him, and he would pick up the teapot, and then he would pour the tea into the cup, and then put it back down, and then pick up the cup with both hands and bring the cup to his lips and drink. And it felt like every single thing he was doing was the most important thing in the world. The deepest, the most beautiful act imaginable. And of course, it was just drinking a cup of tea, about the simplest thing you can do. And yet it was transformed into poetry, into art, into kind of infinite significance, meaning, and depth. And I was like, what is that? I've never seen anybody drink a cup of tea like that, and it wasn't a performance. Like he wasn't trying to convince anyone of anything, or it wasn't like, how some people kind of do things with, it's like they fake meaning, they fake significance. But it wasn't that. It was real, and it was just, and it was seamless, because it was like every single thing he did, every step he took, when he opened the door, when he put on his jacket, when he looked left, right. It was just like completely uninterrupted presence. And it's quite striking to suddenly realize that I think I already knew that you could be more or less present, right? That's something intuitively we all feel. Sometimes we're really, really there. Sometimes we're a little bit dispersed and distracted. But you might think that it's kind of like a scale of 1 to 10, and you hover around, a 7 or an 8, and sometimes you go up to a 9, in a moment of particular emotional significance or something very powerful happens, and you get really present to what's going on, and you're completely focused, or you're in danger. You have to focus. Or those most beautiful moments in your life, the birth of a child, or the unforgettable things happen, and you're completely present. And then you go back to hovering around, and then sometimes you're way down 2 or 3, you didn't sleep well, you're multitasking, distracted, like that. But suddenly meeting Thai just means teacher in Vietnamese, so we just refer to him as Thai. It's a kind of nice. It's a term of respect, but it's quite like endearing. I don't know. It's quite a gentle term of respect. So meeting him and seeing him speak and move and be, I suddenly realized that that scale didn't just go to 10, right? It went, and not just to 100, but it was just like suddenly, instead of 1 to 10, it was 1 to infinite.
Wow.
Yeah, it felt like, oh my goodness, I didn't even realize I was just like scratching the surface of presence, what it means to really be here now. There was this kind of infiniteness to it. So I don't know if you know, like in mathematics, there's this concept of an asymptote. When a curve, reaches, it's sort of reaching a certain limit, and it never gets there. It just gets closer and closer, but you have to go infinitely far, and the further you go along the curve, the closer it gets, the smaller the distance with that limit gets, but it never reaches it. It just, so it goes, it's infinite. It can get infinitely close. And it felt like that. It felt like maybe there's something in the nature of the present moment that you can just keep deepening into the present moment. You can keep concentrating your being, your energy, your awareness, your consciousness into this slice of now. And the more you do that, the more real you become, the less like a ghost you feel, and the less like a ghost the things in your life are. Like, you know what it's like when you drink a coffee or a tea or even a water or whatever it is, and you drink it, you kind of knock it back, and then 2 minutes later you can't even remember what it tasted like, or if you drank it or not, and most of our life goes by like that we're not really fully aware of the wonder of simple things. Like, so you just took a sip of water or something, and it would be interesting to maybe, and for the listeners, you can try this at home. The next time you take a little sip of tea or coffee or water, try to really actually like turn on all the sensitivity of your tongue and your mouth to feel the magic of just a liquid substance. It's liquid. I mean, liquid is amazing. Like, it coats everything, coats the tongue. You can feel it. It's very sensuous. And then like you can remember that drop of that little mouthful of water is actually the condensation of a cloud. Giant cloud that was floating in the sky, a few weeks or months ago, before it fell as rain into a reservoir, into a stream, and was, went through whatever process it had to go through to get to you, to come out of the tap for you to drink it. But when you drink it, you can kind of feel like, wow, this connects me to the clouds. This connects me to the whole water cycle, and even beyond. I mean, the water that we drink is ancient. It's always been water. like most of it is actually from before the kind of the formation of planet Earth. It comes from asteroids way out in the rim of the solar system that bombarded the Earth, the young Earth. So it's like more than 4 billion years old, and it's like we just drink it, poof, as though it's nothing. So anyway, this is just an example, but to say that Tai did everything like that with this full presence, and sitting near him, I sometimes say it felt like sitting near a furnace. There's something, these kind of waves of energies coming off him, and you would, you sit near him and you'd get really clear. You suddenly become aware of all these kind of background mental processes that maybe you weren't aware of a moment ago, and you suddenly think, wow, I'm so mindful, I'm really meditating. And then it goes away, and then it's like, oh, hang on, that wasn't me.
You were in the field. It wasn't you. Yeah, it was him. Yeah.
So he gives you a taste, but then you have to figure out how to recreate that, how to get back to that place, how to train it, because it's daily training. And everything can be trained. And I think that was the real realization for me, that there was this capacity, this muscle, this kind of potential that I had of just how aware I could be of anything, and I had never trained it. But now suddenly I could train it, and he was giving me the way to do that. And I suddenly realized, like, wow, everything else is built on that. Like, whatever else I do, it has to start with whether or not I'm aware of it. And like, to what degree I'm aware, and to what degree I can focus that awareness and maintain it in a steady way, uninterrupted. And I suddenly realized, like, all my studies in music, mathematics, and science, and anything depended on the quality and the clarity of that awareness. And yet nothing in my education had given me a way to cultivate that awareness. So I suddenly thought, like, this is the foundation. This has to come first. Like, whatever else I'm going to do, I have to do this. Like, I have to get down, and then maybe I can, turn my attention to other things. And, coming back to your original question, like from a householder's life to a monastic life, that took several years, because I went to Plum Village the first time when I was 19, changed my life. It got me in touch with my grief. It helped me to handle that. So I was going, thinking about getting like altered mental states and, kind of crazy awareness of parallel universes. I don't know what I thought I was going to do, but what I came away with was actually a way to handle my, to be with and to feel my grief and my sorrow without drowning. And then also connected with my mother, and with her presence still very much alive in me. And so it really changed my life. It really turned my life around. And so I came back at least twice a year, every year after that, for retreats. But I was in a relationship. So my girlfriend, the very first time I came back from Plum Village, we had the biggest fight of our lives. And she was very kind of like skeptical, because I'd changed a lot. Suddenly I just declared I was vegetarian. I didn't drink wine anymore. I was kind of like, I was pretty full of it, maybe a little bit overconfident as well, thinking I had figured it all out, whereas in fact I hadn't really.
Were you imposing your thoughts on her?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I was like, you need to do this and listen, just, do this, do that. I thought I had it all figured out. So I was very overconfident and a little bit arrogant. And she was, she's a very, very intelligent and sensitive person. And yeah, she wasn't having any of that. So it took a while, maybe like 2 years, I think. I just kept going back. Maybe after 2 or 3 years, she noticed, she really started to see, okay, that he's changed. You know, there are some, like, he's listening now, he can listen in a different way. Maybe he's taking better care of himself. Maybe the quality of his love is kind of improving. And she was like, and I think, you know, we went to see a talk by Thai in London when he came to London, probably in 2001. And she read one of his books, and gradually she was like, okay, fine, I'll go see. So she went. She had her experience at Plum Village. Luckily, she went on her own, so it wasn't mediated by me. She had her own experience. She made friends with the nuns. She had an amazing time. And then after that, it was like, okay, that's it. We will always go, and we'll go together, and we would go for retreats every year together. But still no thought of monastic life, because we had this amazing relationship. And in fact, with the practice of Plum Village, it got better and better. Like, we were more and more in love. We were more and more kind of able to understand each other, able to understand each other's deepest aspirations, able to support each other, maybe gradually cause each other to suffer less. Because it's very painful, you know, that when you cause the one you love to suffer, that's not really part of the plan. And yet, you know, we do. So it was beautiful that we were kind of learning how not to do that. And yeah, and we had a wonderful life. I mean, she was a producer at the BBC. I was a composer in London. And yet every time we went for a retreat, we kind of felt like after 3 weeks, we're like, okay, this is it. Now it's getting really deep. We're really starting to see, you know, into the roots of things and starting to understand ourselves. But it's not long enough. We want to come back for longer. We made a commitment in 2004. And we said, within 1 year, we made this like solemn vow to each other. Within a year, we will come back and spend at least 3 months in Plum Village. We'll do a 3-month retreat, which is the traditional rainy season retreat. That usually is just for monastics, but in Plum Village, the lay people can join that 3-month retreat. And we're like, that's what we need. We want to go deep, 3 months. So we arranged everything. And on the last day of the year, you know, since we'd made our promise, we managed to finally leave London. It was very difficult, you know, to get a sabbatical, to arrange everything, but we did. Went to Plum Village, ended up staying there 7 months, because 3 months, once 3 months had gone by, it wasn't enough. We were like, called London, quit the BBC, and they were like, you know, you don't have to quit. You don't have to quit. Like, your job will be here when you get back. We'll promote you, you know. And I had commissions as a composer, but we were just like, no, this is more important. So after 7 months, we bought a little house in the French countryside, not far from Plum Village. And we were like, okay, that's it. Never going back to London. This practice has to be at the center of our lives. Maybe we'll create a lay practice center for lay people, run by lay people. It's going to be all about this practice of meditation. But still, the thought of monastic life just never came up, never occurred to us, until suddenly it did. And that's
like that.
Pretty much a little bit of a miracle. I don't know. I mean, I could go into the whole story of that, but it's maybe not the most relevant thing. But anyway, it happened more or less simultaneously that we both realized that there was that possibility, and we were really being called to it suddenly quite strongly. And it was this sense that you know, you can talk about aspiration and talk about like what your deepest desire, like your deepest dream. Suddenly it felt like it didn't fit in the householder's life anymore. It was the householder's life felt too narrow and confining. And we just realized, like, if we have a family, then probably like 80% of our energy is going to go towards sustaining that family and looking after our children and each other and our careers, and that's beautiful. Like, that is a sacrament. That it's absolutely beautiful path. There's nothing wrong with it. But it just felt like we wanted to give all of our energy to this path of understanding and service. When I say service, I mean like knowing the amount of suffering in the world. There's just this desire that comes up from deep inside to find some way to alleviate it, in oneself and in the world, and that was drawing us very, very powerfully. And we felt like, well, there was a promise we'd made to each other, so we'd been together, I guess 8 or 9 years by that point. And we had made a promise to each other that whenever we had a decision to take, we'd always do the craziest thing. So if we had to
Warrior
choose,
spirit.
yeah, always going to be the crazy thing. And so when that decision came up, it was like lay life, monastic life. It was obvious like which one was crazy. And so we were kind of, I mean, from the first time we talked about it, we had like a probably 5-hour-long conversation, but we kind of already knew we were going to do it, even in that first conversation. And so we both ordained. So she's a nun here in Plum Village. And
no kidding.
Yeah.
Oh my How cool is that? Wow, what a story. So
And
I want to ask you
Go ahead.
some nuanced in that thing, because the way you portray it, it didn't occur to me as there any inner resistance that you're dealing with or any kind of courage you need to muster to lean force this. It seemed very naturalistic. Am I projecting too much, or was there some kind of grief you need to let go of your material life, and you need to muster the courage and so forth? Anything like that?
It was absolutely terrifying. And the material stuff, the house, the car, the money, this stuff, that wasn't important. That didn't matter. It was easy. In fact, it was a relief to let go of all of that. But to let go of our relationship, our intimacy, our connection, and just like our daily life together, just the amount of time we would be together, just to talk and to dream together, that was unbelievably difficult. It was like, and it really made us hesitate, because we were thinking like, are we crazy? Is this just completely insane to do this? And of course, lots of people told us we were insane. Like our families were not happy. Most of our friends were really, really upset as well. And it is really hard. It's really hard for the families to understand, and it was hard for my friends. I realized, and I there's things I regret, because, well, it's not exactly regret, because I don't regret the decision I took, but it's like I recognize the pain that I caused by that decision, and the pain that I caused myself and my friends and my family. And that's just, it's really, really hard. Because I think at the time I remember conversations with my friends, and they said, but we'll never see you, and I was like, no, but we'll still be really connected, and I still love you, and we'll talk, and we'll stay in touch, and we'll write letters. And the truth is, not really. They were right, I was wrong. And I kind of feel that pain. I feel the pain I caused them. They said, well, you're not going to be in our lives. You're not going to be there for, the important stuff. You're not going to be there, when our children are born. You're not going to be there when we get married, when we have loss. And, and I'm like, no, I'll still be there. I'll be in touch. The truth is, it's really hard. And, maybe some of those friends I'm still closely in touch with, and one has even moved to Plum Village to live nearby.
You were the first.
And so actually I kind of think, we thought quite naively maybe more of them would come and live nearby, not to be monastics, but just to kind of form a community. We already had that dream together as a group of friends. But that was, it's happened only partly less than we thought, and it took a lot longer.
Mm.
So yeah, just acknowledging like my father, it was desperately painful for him. He was very invested in, I think he saw us having children. He
Mm.
saw my future as a composer.
Mm.
That was very important to him. Like how much he had sacrificed, to
Mm.
give me that freedom, to support me in the kind of education that I had, driving me to music lessons every
Mm.
week, and using his spare time, to drive me to these courses, and just the amount of energy and love he put into that. I think for him it was very painful, and he felt it as a rejection of him and
Mm.
values, and the path that he saw for me.
Mm.
But it's very hard. Like I sometimes think that about decisions in general. Like a decision is not a decision unless it's between two things, that you want them both.
Mm.
It's only a decision if you want both things.
Mm.
If you only want one of them, well, then it's not a decision. It's automatic. You just you go with the thing that you want to do. But the
Mm.
problem here was that we wanted both. Like
Mm.
our life together as a couple was so beautiful, um, and so kind of perfect in so many ways, that of course we wanted to continue that.
Mm.
Yet there was this other desire, and in the end, it was even stronger. And partly it was the sense that, at least for me, this person I was with, I felt like I don't get to keep her for myself.
Mm.
She could help so many people, and her
Mm.
love could extend to so many people. And if it's tightly bound in this kind of magnetic, dyad relationship, and then maybe extending to a family, it's kind of like it's not achieving what it could in the world, like the
Mm.
power of her being, of her presence, and what she can offer. And it was kind of a bet, in a sense. It was like, I think I need to kind of give her to the world,
Mm.
because of what she can do. And that was incredibly painful. But I have to say, like last year when we were on the stage at TED in Edinburgh, and she gave a
Mm.
talk for our community, I really had the feeling like, okay, 15 years later, yeah, we were right. This is like, she's doing it, and it's amazing. This is just the beginning. So you can see her TED Talks, is the true dedication, on TED, and many other things on YouTube, and so on and so forth. But she's just an amazing, powerful person who's helping, I don't know how many thousands of people around the world.
Mm.
Yeah.
So let me just do a quick callback, because you had talked about the quality of presence your teacher, Thich Nhat Hanh, had, and anyone watching your talks, your Dharma talks, would get a sense of that. I got a sense of that. The quality of presence, the little seeds that you plant in every sentence that you make. So I just want to do a callback to that, so that you too, my friend, is reaping the benefits of contributing, to thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of people.
Oh, thank you. I
Yeah.
mean, for me, it's all very much work in progress.
Mm-hmm.
I consider myself, a young monk. I've been a monk for getting on for 15 years, and I think we're just getting started. There's
Mm-hmm.
so much more to develop and to train and discover inside.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but I feel very excited about that. I feel like I always wanted a life in which I would never stop learning. I think from a very early age, that was a kind of fundamental thing for me, that whatever path I had, it would be one in which one which I would never retire, and always continue to grow and to learn. And I feel like this path, the monastic path, really is that. It allows for that. I don't have to worry about money. I don't have to worry about being, making a reputation for myself, or, having a career, or I don't have to worry about any of those things. I just have to take care of my daily practice and make sure I'm staying true to the path. And it's endless.
Mm-hmm.
It's maybe not even one life, but life after life. That's the vow we take when we become monastic. It's like
Oh, no kidding.
life after life. Yeah.
Wow, I did not know that. I thought
Mhm.
it's you sign up for this lifetime and next life you get to swap out a different identity. That's fascinating.
I don't think I would want to. It's like, down this path. It's just, this is it. This is it. The way to live.
Asymptote, right? You just lifetime after lifetime keep going
Yeah.
towards the infinite.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to do another callback to what you said earlier on Noble Warrior. We talk about commitment and sacrifice.
Mm-hmm.
You don't know what you're truly committed to until you need to make certain sacrifice of two things you both want or multiple things you want.
Exactly.
Because that's a great revelation to what you truly value. And it's obvious that you sacrifice intimacy, relationships with family and friends, and this material life in the pursuit of this spiritual path that you're on. So thank you for that. And I'm also quite fascinated with your story as well, because in my own spiritual journey too, my path is more of an ayahuasca path.
Mm-hmm.
And this beautiful medicine showing me ways, showing me truth that I hadn't thought about before, having encountered it. And as such, more and more I'm being called to go to the jungle, actually sit with the medicine with, for extended period of time.
Okay.
And I
Okay.
have similar concerns about, okay, what about my career and
Mm.
relationships and all
Right.
these things. So it's actually quite poignant that you articulated this. Um, by no means I have a clear answer yet. I don't think I will do the monastic life quite yet. It's not there yet, but the seed is growing, right? This yearning for a deeper spiritual connection to and an understanding of truth, and also being wholly who I am. And as you said, move, talk with that full consciousness no matter what I do. It's something that I do desire. So I appreciate your story.
Oh, beautiful. Wow. I would say go for it, but beware. Beware.
Well, one thing that we do have in common is our love for learning. That's ultimately what brought us together through Rome research,
Yes.
through the understanding of the world, the universe. Now that I consume more of your content, to know the depth of your mind, your presence, also your understanding. But before we go there, I do want to ask you this question. Knowing what you know today, I think for especially the seeker types, they have a romantic notion of what's it like to be a monk, right? You live on top of the mountain, you just study your scriptures, and you see your daily meditation. And then, as you said, you don't need to worry about material needs and success and all these burdensome responsibilities. What are some of the things that you know today? Like, well, it's just different kind of, I won't say burden, but responsibility,
Yeah.
right? Different kind of cost. It's just different. So, are there things that you wish you had known, before you joined, and then lived the monastic life?
Good question. Well, I think I came in pretty much with my eyes open because I'd been around the community long enough, and I'd seen monastics leave, right? Because not everybody sticks at it, and I'd seen some people I really admired and thought, would be monastics for their whole lives. I'd see them go back to lay life and maybe have families and so on. And so I kind of knew it's not easy. It's clearly not easy because there are some very, very smart, really inspiring, powerful people who, in a sense, didn't make it. Well, it's not to make it or not make it. They chose a different path, and they're also doing wonderful things. So it's not a defeat, but it's kind of like, if I want to do this for my whole life, I have to realize that, clearly it's not going to be easy. There are going to be moments of challenge, moments of doubt. So I knew that, I knew that the community that I was going to kind of live in was very, very beautiful, very, very harmonious, like a really kind of enlightened community. And yet that there were also issues, things that maybe were not in accord with my way of seeing the world, my way of understanding things, my priorities. I knew that it's not a perfect community, but I had really, received good advice from one of my elder sisters, Sister Gina, who said, well, we're not looking for a perfect community. We're just looking for a place where we get enough reminders to keep coming back to the practice, and we have enough support to use the tools that we are offered to cut through our afflictions. And if we're doing that, then the community is good enough. It doesn't need to be perfect. It just needs to be a place where there are tools that you can apply, and you get enough reminders to apply them, that you actually do it, to cut through your afflictions. And so that was my kind of criterion. It's like, okay, if that's happening and if I can maintain that, then it's good enough. And so, to come back to your question, what was your question? What were the challenges?
Yeah, what's, knowing what you know today, you had probably some romantic notion of what's it like to be a monk.
Right.
And but in actual practice, you're like, oh, I didn't know I had to do this thing
Yeah.
forever and ever. And it's part of being a monk, right? The lifestyle of being a monk.
Well,
I wish I had known this. Let me
Right.
make sure to tell the, people who think about this,
Yeah.
hey, this is awesome, but you got to pay this price, this cost.
Yeah.
Day in and day out.
So I think you're correct that many people have those romantic notions about what it is to be a monk. I think I didn't have so many because I'd been around long enough to see, enough. But I kind of knew what I was getting into. So one thing is, there are different kinds of monastic life as well. So
I didn't know that.
Yeah, there are many different kinds of monastic life. So also true in the Christian tradition, there's contemplative monastics and there's active monastics, who are engaged in service. And so in the Plum Village tradition, I knew that I was ordaining into a path, a tradition, which is known as engaged Buddhism. So that basically means, like, if you want a quiet life, this is not the community for you. Like, if you think you want to go and sit in a cave for the rest of your life and meditate, this isn't it. That's not what happens here. What happens here is that we offer retreats for anybody who wants to come and learn the art of living in daily life. And concretely, what that means is that we offer those retreats, we organize those retreats, we cook for those retreats, we maintain the grounds for those retreats, we have to renovate the buildings to host those retreats, we have to build websites and run a registration office and go shopping and buy food. And it's a massive operation because we're receiving tens of thousands of people a year. It's a big thing. And then we go, maybe 6 months of the year we go on tour, getting invited to different countries to teach and to offer retreats here and there. So it's very, very active life. It's not, sitting quietly on top of a mountain and in silence. Having said that, built into the fabric of our monastic life, there is a lot of silence and there is a lot of contemplation. It's just woven into this kind of fabric of engaged action. So the two really go together, contemplation and action hand in hand. And so I was okay with that. I think some people are not. Some people are like, whoa, hang on, this is too much, too many people, too many retreats. I just want to, sit in my room and contemplate. And so quite often they end up leaving. If that's what they're looking for, this is not that. This is not that path. I guess, yeah, it's been surprising in a sense to find myself quite quickly having to be amongst a group of monastics that are really sort of having to take responsibility for the whole, for the community. Luckily, there's many of us, and we've got a great team. But I think, yeah, that came maybe sooner than I expected. And there is some aspect of responsibility and a kind of burden with that. It's hard suddenly having to figure out, fundraising to repair these broken down farm buildings in the south of France in order to be able to receive people for retreats.
So on that note, let me ask you a quick question. Because you had alluded to earlier, hey, I don't have any worldly responsibility for money and all these things, a reputation.
Personally.
But now it's transmuted to money for the whole institute, reputation for the whole institute, teaching for the whole institute.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about how does it transmute? Because it sounds the same in terms of the responsibilities, but the experience is different, I'm assuming, yeah?
Yes. So the nice thing is that, like no matter how, it's like something the abbot, we have a wonderful abbot called Brother Phap Linh, which means Dharma friend. And he sometimes says, it's like, no matter how good a talk you give, no matter how many people like it on YouTube or whatever, you still get the same pocket money every month, because we have a little pocket money. We don't have no money, we have some money, but
okay. Individually.
So it's not a lot.
Okay.
40 euros per month.
Okay.
So you can imagine, these days that doesn't go very far, and it's spent on razor blades and shampoo, or soap, toothpaste. It's like, or buying little gifts for our friends or something. And it doesn't matter whether you're the abbot, whether you're a senior Dharma teacher or whatever, you still just get 40 euros a month. And there's something really, really beautiful about that, because we're not special because we can give a good talk. We're no more important than, the brothers who are raking the leaves in the garden, and in fact, we may be raking the leaves in the garden the next day as well, so it's very, we rotate through all the different responsibilities in the monastery, and that keeps us humble, which is really, really healthy. And we have sometimes very high profile events. You get invited here and there to the COP in Glasgow, to TED, to speak with CEOs, and the danger is that can go to your head and you start to think that you're special or important. But we have lots and lots of checks and balances in place in our monastic life. So, you come back into the monastic residence, and if you've kind of nourished that pride a little bit, your brothers will just chop you to pieces.
Okay, so do you mind going into details? Okay, let's not put anyone's head names in the conversation. Let's say me. I'm part of the thing. I did a TED talk. Got 1 million views, whatever the thing is. I came back. A lot of self-importance. Look how many views and prestige I'm bringing to the village. How would you get me to humble me?
I'd probably just tease you. It's very gentle often, but it's very like, I remember. Okay, so I'll give you a story. Like one time, I was a novice monk. So I'd been ordained a couple of years, but I was kind of like called upon quite quickly to facilitate circle sharing groups and this kind of thing, because I had some experience already as a lay practitioner. So, and there was just a need, like they needed people to help out. So I went on this tour to Malaysia with my teacher and about probably 30 or 40 monks, most of whom, and probably all of whom, were much, much more senior than me. And I remember we had this retreat in a big resort, and I came back to my room after the, we call it Dharma sharing, but it's like circle sharing time where we have a group of about 20 people. And I came back in, and I was sharing a room with my mentor, and I was like, wow, yeah, the Dharma sharing was so amazing. Like so many people cried, and they were really moved, and they went really deep, and they were like, huh? And he was like, okay, you're counting, huh? Counting. Interesting. You think that's what it's about? You think the more people cry, the better you are? You think you did that? Merciless. I was like, oh, okay, I guess not.
I love it.
Yeah.
Oh man.
That was the Zen sword waiting for me behind the door. I got in.
Now go clean the toilet.
Yeah, right, exactly. Yeah.
Oh man. Okay, so would you say sort of the horizon, right? Obviously you never get to the horizon, it's an asymptote. Would you say this engaged style of Buddhism, the goal is to awaken people basically in the more the merrier? Would you say giving people tools and an environment to do that? Like what would you say is the intention of this, very active, very orchestrated, big operation to of practicing Buddhism?
Yeah, I guess there is the wish to kind of seed a collective awakening, partly because our survival as a species may well depend on it. It seems like our way of thinking, our way of seeing the world, our way of understanding ourselves, and our way of understanding the world has produced this kind of extractive consumerist capitalist society that we are enmeshed in, and which is eating the planet, and rapidly destroying it, rapidly maybe reducing the life carrying capacity of this planet. And so if it's our way of thinking and our way of seeing that has contributed to this state of affairs, then maybe we should change our way of thinking, our way of seeing, our view about what we are, what the world is, what our relationship is with the world. And, then you have the question, well, how? Like, what would that look like? What would it mean to change from the view of ourselves as individuals, for example, that are basically in competition with each other for resources, for reputation, for fame, for money, for sex, for whatever. But kind of currently the way things are, right? If I look back at my education, every single exam I took, every time I was tested alone. Right? I was tested as me, as this notion of a separate person that was me. I was never tested in my capacity to collaborate. You ever taken an exam as a team?
No.
It doesn't happen. You go through whole school and college, and you go to a PhD maybe, and you're always alone. And then after that, once you actually have to start working, you have to collaborate, but you don't know how. You've never been trained to do that. So we're a very individualistic society, and we're trained to have very individualistic dreams. There's constantly competition, and it's even the culture in which competition is kind of celebrated as the way to generate innovation, right? I mean, companies are supposed to compete with each other because the idea is that will drive innovation, that will make them better, that will make them more efficient. Combative judicial system in which two parties have to basically fight it out to determine what is the truth. And it seems to be that we think that fighting is a way to discover the truth.
Mm-hmm.
I would maybe question that. I was like, well, maybe that's not the best way, to find out what's true and what's not true. Maybe that's not the best way to tap into our deepest creativity and capacity for innovation. So that's all at the level of view. So then if you say, well, okay, well, how do we change our view? Maybe we already have a little intuition, a little sense that in some way we are interconnected. We have these terms floating around. My teacher coined this term interbeing. So the question is not to be or not to be, right? Because there's no such thing as to be a separate entity, separately existent. You can only ever interbe with everything else, with the trees that provide the oxygen, with the whole planet and the sun and time and space that provides food and a universe that we can live in, and each other, the exchange of ideas and emotions, and we are each other. We're not as separate as we think. And that's starting to disseminate into our culture. So there's more of an understanding of our interconnectivity. But how do you really make that into a cultural transformation? So there's a big enough shift, a big enough awakening to our interdependence with the earth, with the cosmos, to the preciousness, the sacredness of everything. And that I believe, if we could have that level of understanding of our interconnection with everything, then we would treat everything with a lot more reverence, a lot more kindness, a lot more compassion and love, and we wouldn't do as much harm. We wouldn't be destroying the place. We wouldn't be wrecking our one precious planet that we can live on. So then the question is, well, if you're going to do that, if that's true, if our view matters, right, which I believe it does, but you can take that as a hypothesis, right? Let's say that's the hypothesis, that our view, if we could change it to this more interdependent view, would be productive of a different kind of society that would do less harm. All of that is a theory, right? I happen to think it's a good one, but you can take it or leave it, or you can test it if you want. But then the question, if you say, okay, well, maybe that's a good theory and want to try it out, then the question is, well, how do you change view at a collective level? What is that? And who knows how to do that, right? So I think, if you want to learn basketball, you go to the NBA. You go to the pros. You find the best people, the best basketball players, and you ask them, how they do what they do. But if you want to learn how to change your mind, right, how to change your way of thinking, how to change your view, then you have to look across all the cultures on the planet and through all of human history. Where has this been a priority, and which traditions have really invested themselves in understanding how our views are formed and how they can be changed? And I believe Buddhism is definitely one of those very, very important lineages that have invested thousands of years and practice and contemplation in figuring out how to do this. And of course there are other traditions. It's not to say it's the only one, but it's an important one and a really, really good one. And I think we have the great privilege of living in an age where we can access pretty much any one of the world's ancient traditions. And those ancient traditions are merging with science, with Western technological civilization, not even Western anymore, but Industrial Revolution started in Europe, but it's now a very much global phenomenon. But technological civilization is merging with this, potentially could merge with this ancient kind of the inner wisdom traditions that have existed. I think very exciting.
I agree with everything that you said. I'm a seeker, if it's not obvious to you by now. I've done dabble and research and explore all kinds of different modalities. And I really love the rigor of Buddhism thinking and the intellectual rigor, the logical conclusion from one thing leading to another, and the mechanics of it all. I did Vipassana, and then I learned a lot about these ideas and principles from that. And as you said, I try to use my scientific mind to refute those points,
Yeah.
but every point makes sense. So I continue to practice those things today.
Yeah.
And one thing that I really appreciate is this intersection between lineage, tradition, timeless wisdom to technology
Mm.
that the Plum Village is embracing.
Yeah.
Because most, and I used, let's say, indigenous leaders of the Amazon,
Mm.
they liked tradition, timeless wisdom, and everything, oral traditions, but they really don't like innovation so much.
Mm. Mm. Mm.
Whereas I believe that the solution lies in the middle. Yes, embrace traditions, timeless wisdom, and lineage, but also see what the tools that there are and then use it to forward the mission in a way that's, conducive to for the good of all, right? So I really appreciate
Yeah.
how you are able to do that. Can you share with us a little bit about how either the institute or how you think about striking a good harmony between tradition and then also cutting edge technology a bit?
Mm. Yes. Well, I really have my teacher to thank for that. The way he kind of set up this very fine tuning between being probably one of the most progressive people I've ever encountered in my life, and yet also being the holder of this ancient tradition, and in the sense being more conservative than the most conservative people in Buddhism. Maybe in Vietnam, people kind of can't figure out, like, is he radical, is he progressive, or is he ultra conservative and super traditional? Because in fact, it's like he said, well, even Vietnamese Buddhism, it needs to be renewed, but it needs to be renewed because it's strayed from the original teachings of the Buddha. So the renewal is actually a return to the source. So it's kind of like you're not being traditional enough. You need to get back to the original teachings of the Buddhism of the Buddha, to really like be true to the tradition. And yet at the same time, you need to be able to stay completely open and continue to learn and to grow, because as soon as you stop learning, well, basically you're stuck, you're dead. Like if a tree doesn't grow, right, it's a dead tree.
Mhm.
Right, so if a tradition isn't growing, it's a dead tradition.
But
So
how, okay, so I agree and awesome, thank you. But what you're saying right now, for anyone listening, even I'm listening, you're saying, "Oh, go left and go right at the same time." I'm like,
Mhm.
I don't know what to do. So how do you do that? How do you stay true to the tradition? How do you also continue to learn?
Yeah, so that's a good question. I have this image of an ancient plum tree. Sometimes you graft plum trees onto old rootstock,
Mhm.
and so the roots are very ancient, very strong, very deep, and yet every spring there's new flowers. There's new
Mm.
blossoms, there's fresh leaves.
Mm,
And
mm,
so
mm.
that the ancient and the new can completely go together. And I feel like Tai really embodied that he had this freshness. Like he always wanted to be in touch with the beginners, with little children in the summer retreat. He would ask them to come and sit close during the talks, and he would give, the first part of every talk would be for the children.
Mm.
They were totally unimpeded by preconceived notions of what is or isn't true, or what is or isn't Buddhism. They had no filters and no kind of they're totally undogmatic, right? Because they don't know anything. They're completely open, and he was really nourished by that. And I think he really wanted to maintain that spirit, and I do too. It's kind of the sense that Buddhism is profoundly anti-dogmatic. That truth is found in life, right? Not in a book. Right? Whatever you hold on to now that you believe to be the truth, ultimately, at some point, you have to let go of it. If you want to touch a higher truth, right? You have to be able to let go of that which you presently believe to be true. And so what that means is you have to be able to examine everything that you think is true now and already see that one day you will let go of it and transcend it. So that means that it's whatever you think is true isn't really true. It's not the final truth. Maybe there is no final truth. And yet, it doesn't mean sort of throwing out the baby with the bathwater or saying you have to renew everything, change everything, throw away all the ancient wisdom, because you have to be humble and you have to say, well, I am also a beginner on this path, and maybe there's wisdom here that I don't fully understand, and before I throw away this traditional practice or this traditional understanding or way of explaining things, let me actually work with it. Let me actually see, do I, have I let it in enough? Have I understood it enough? And so, yeah, it's that kind of spirit of humility, but also of kind of scientific inquiry and readiness to let go of, something that you believe to be true in order to take another step on the path. And really the sense is that whatever can be said, right? Whatever can be written down is always going to be imperfect, like a partial representation of the nature of reality and the nature of your own insight and understanding, right? The map is not the territory, and all language is map. It is by its very nature a compression of what it is that, language points to something, which is life, which is our own consciousness, our own experience of the wonder of everything. But it isn't the thing that it points to. And so it's kind of necessarily wrong. Weird, because we spend so much time talking and writing things down and try to like codify things and say precisely what we believe and what we understand. And yet in this tradition of meditation, we know that we even have to leave language behind. And ideally, you leave it behind every time you enter into meditation, right? That's the challenge, is to be able to leave behind the constant stream of blah, 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 narrating and describing your own experience to yourself, in order to be able to touch experience itself directly with no linguistic intermediary, no reduction, into language. And so that when you have that experience of being able to enter complete silence, the mental chatter stops, and you see how insufficient it is to describe what's really going on, what this is really all about. Once you see how insufficient it is, and once you have that experience many times, it makes you very cautious about saying anything with any certainty, saying anything as being like, this is it, this is completely, definitely, absolutely true, because you know that it can't be. And so that gives you a kind of freedom from thinking that you have the final answer, which then gives you space to continue learning. And at the same time, you have, because you see that to open your mouth and say stuff may, from time to time, actually be helpful for some people. Out of compassion, ideally, you do speak. You try your best skillfully to use words to communicate something that you've touched in meditation because you think it might actually help, and because you've been helped. Like I've been helped by my teacher very skillfully deciding to enter the thicket, the labyrinth of using words. He actually did it skillfully enough that he could help me touch something that's beyond words. And the Buddha did the same thing. Like when you go and read the sutras, it's all words, and yet what he's pointing at is something beyond the words. And he did it skillfully enough that I think, okay, maybe I should try to do the same, but because I'm so inexperienced, I'm going to rely more on what they did, right? I will reference the sutras, and I will reference, my teacher's interpretation of those sutras or commentary on those sutras, because I know, like, I'm not there yet. I don't have that wisdom yet, exactly, how to tune that, which words to use and which words not to use. I'm still learning. And so that makes me cautious about just changing everything and switching it all up and throwing out what they did, because I'm like, I don't have it yet, so I'm still figuring it out.
So pause on that real quick. I wanted to allude to what you said with the illustration. For those of you listening, how do you describe the totality of this phone with language? Is impossible. There's no way you can just describe everything about this phone with infinite amount of words. It doesn't matter, because words is an abstraction to the idea of this phone and the functionality of this phone and the meaning of this phone to me or to you or wherever. So what Brother Spirit is alluding to is exactly that. So coming back to the beautiful mastery of someone who is a Buddha or a Thich Nhat Hanh, who's been articulating the truth with their abstraction, with their narrative, with their words. So I'm curious, as someone who is a seeker, who's 100% a student, sometimes a teacher myself, is in the articulation, in the grappling, in the attempt, in the effort that I get better in articulating the truth of that. So in the beginning of my journey, I would borrow a lot of, the narratives, the quotes, the tools that other teachers have long passed down as a way to illustrate my point. But I also realize it's in my own attempt, using my own words, I have a much deeper, a nuanced understanding of it. So long way to ask this question. At what point did you stop being a student and start to step into your role as a teacher?
Well, I don't think I have stopped being a student. I want to be a student my whole life, but my teacher, I had a kind of realization at one point that, there's a thing that happens, when you have a famous teacher like Tai, that he was very aware of and really tried to guard against, which is that you end up kind of deifying a little bit the teacher. And that's happened with the Buddha too, that people in many countries and different traditions, they kind of make him a little bit into a god. And he really tried to say, no, I'm just a human being. And the whole point is that you too can have this depth of understanding and wisdom that is innate in all human beings. And yet, I see it now. My teacher passed away this year on January 22nd. And there's a tendency to kind of, to really kind of venerate him, which is partly very correct, because he's just such an extraordinary human being. But he was, in his teaching and in his life and his way of living, he was always trying to kind of deflect that. He was never, ever looking for recognition. Like most of his teachings kind of went out into the world and have been disseminated and are now coming back, in other forms and getting appropriated here and there. And he never put his name on it, so a lot of it is just there, but you don't know that it's Thich Nhat Hanh. It's just, you think that's just meditation, but maybe it was actually in large part due to his way of teaching that it has spread and disseminated.
Do you mind zooming in that point real quick? Like he found out that what he said some time ago, someone appropriated it or adopted it or changed it without giving attribution.
Yeah.
It's natural for a regular human. I don't know how Thich Nhat Hanh react, right? It's this like injustice. I want my credit kind of a thing. How did he interact with, I'm sure it's constant, right? Realization that somebody borrow or steal his material or his ideas.
He never said anything about it.
Never.
He was completely unconcerned. If anything, it's us who are kind of like, hey, on that app, you talk about walking meditation, but that's the way Thai taught walking meditation in Plum Village, and nobody else teaches it like that. Or now everybody's talking about mindful dishwashing. Well, who was the first person to talk about mindful dishwashing? Definitely Thich Nhat Hanh. That's like one of his signature practices. Now it's out there. Even mindfulness itself, like really he was the first person to introduce mindfulness to the West with the miracle of mindfulness. And now it's kind of like, it's everywhere. Of course, like he didn't invent mindfulness. It's part of an ancient Buddhist tradition, but his way of teaching it and his way of translating it and making it accessible to a Western audience, I'd say that's been appropriated here and there. But he was completely free from any concern about that. And I think, sometimes it was almost frustrating. It was like, please, let's, if we could defend this a little bit more, then maybe, it would be easier to, maintain this large international organization and maintain the buildings and have a little bit more resources.
Yeah.
But
So what you're pointing to is a little paradoxical, right?
it was very
Because
careful. And I think, he was like, he doesn't want to be famous. He lived a very, very anonymous life. He avoided so many like potentially kind of reputation-making interviews. He would just turn them down. He had this rule. It's like, if you're a journalist, you want to come and interview Thai, you have to come and practice in the meditation center for a week before you. So he's like, if you're not practicing mindfulness, you won't understand what I'm talking about. So and live here for a week. And of course, most journalists don't have time to do that. So then the interview is cancelled, and that's that.
I appreciate you. That is not a requirement to interview you, even though I would love it to visit Plum Village one day, but I appreciate that it's not a requirement in our conversation.
Not yet.
Yeah, not yet, not yet. But I want to point to something because in the game of bringing more awareness to Buddhism and the practice and then also the juice, basically, right? The potential reward of doing this simple act of meditation and following these traditions, it requires profile, prestige. So then the world knows about this human being or a person or institution. At the same time, the practice is not about self-importance. So it's a little paradoxical. How do you reconcile those two notions? Because, knowing you, I know you're not about self-importance, but building reputation helps the entire institution. So how do you reconcile that in your mind?
Yeah, what I think what's wonderful about monastic life. So say, for example, I'm a composer, right? And I'm continue to be a composer as a monk. So I write chants for the community, or I write little bits of music for films and things that we put out into the world. I experience it as a blessing, that I don't have to depend on that for my income or my career. Like I don't have to be a famous composer. I can just do it out of love, and that gives me an incredible freedom as a composer because I'm not dependent on it for my livelihood. And in the same way, when it comes to teaching, whether or not I give a good talk, it doesn't matter. Right? I still have, rice in my bowl at lunchtime and 40 euros a month pocket money and a place to lay my head at night, and a meditation cushion to sit on. that's kind of amazing. And also, like, if maybe I do something prominent that sticks out a little bit, but then the next day, I'm just folded back into the brotherhood in the community, and I get to disappear again, and be more anonymous, which is a real relief. Like, I experience it. It's a wonderful thing, not to always stick out. And yet, like you say, for the organization, it's helpful that people know the name, of Plum Village tradition, and Plum Village Monastery is sort of becoming known as a, I guess, something that people can trust, where we haven't had any scandals. Like, there's high integrity. There's a lot of care to maintain our ethics, our ethical conduct, our monastic precepts, all these things we really like hold to, which then I think does allow people to kind of take refuge and to go, okay, these people are not after my money. They're not, it's not a scam. It's not a cult. It's like it's sincere. And so that's important. And then, we have the challenge of kind of like, well, so many people want to come. Like, this summer, we had summer opening for the first time in the last 3 years because of COVID. And so we, our summer opening was fully booked within 10 minutes.
Awesome.
Right?
Congratulations.
Well, it's a great problem to have.
Yeah.
But what that means is there's many, many poor people who would like to be able to come to Plum Village, but we don't have the facilities to receive them. So we just don't have enough rooms, or toilets, or the right kind of water treatment system, and so on. Which means that somehow we need to raise money to build better facilities to be able to receive more people, because people want to come. So it's not like we're doing it in order to be known as Plum Village, or in order to make a big 30-foot golden Buddha or something. It's not about that. It's like we just want to build simple ecological residence blocks, that people can come and stay in and be, live very simply but comfortably, so that they can enjoy a retreat here. And then we have the paradox that because we want to keep our retreat fees very low, it means we don't have a lot of surplus. So we run it's a very lean operation. I've calculated that I think it costs, I don't know exactly, but I think it's about 6,000 to 8,000 euros a year per monastic.
Wow.
And that's like healthcare, travel. That's actually a share of all our utilities, like gas, electricity, water. That's everything, food, everything. And I don't, there's not, like in France, I don't know how many people can live on that per year. That's quite hard. And yet we live very simply, but very well. And as a whole organization, we don't have a lot of surplus. We just cover our costs with retreats, about 50%, and 50% from donations, and that enables us to keep the costs for those retreats low. We give a lot of scholarships. I don't think we've ever turned anyone away. Anybody who wants to come for a retreat, we figure it out so that they can come.
Awesome.
But because we want to keep it like that, that means that when we have to raise 12 million euros, to renovate all these buildings, it's a struggle. Like it is hard. So that's the kind of pinch point that we're in now, because it's kind of like we've grown so fast, and now we are this. We've gone from this little almost refugee village, that Thai built to receive boat people from the Vietnam, from after the Vietnam War, so that they could have a place to land and nourish their Vietnamese roots and be connected with other Vietnamese people. That from that, with nothing, with no money, it's grown into this large international kind of retreat center, and with 11 centers around the world.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Then
That's
700.
amazing. Wow.
In the lineage.
Congratulations. I mean, that's such good work, and I'm very moved, inspired by decades of work
Mm.
that your teacher started, and the legacy now continues, even
Mm.
beyond his lifetime, beyond his name, right? So, um, and I think, let's see, how do I ask this question? Well, one, the opportunities for virtual programs, it's
Mm.
something that's really obvious to me. All right. If you can't house them physically, I'm sure
Right.
people would rather take a virtual program rather than not having
Yeah.
any support at all. So a
Yeah.
virtual program would make it infinitely scalable, so to speak.
Mm.
And I think it would be it's figure outable, right? To be
Yeah.
able to do a virtual program
But that's
somehow.
something
Mhm.
that is something that happened kind of automatically during the pandemic because we couldn't receive people here
Mhm.
because of the lockdown, and so we had to figure out a way to reach people. So we did start offering online retreats.
Oh,
And,
great.
our teacher Tai, way back in 2009, he said, "You need to build an online monastery. You need to put all of this stuff online and make it accessible to people, so that they don't, if they can't afford to
You
travel,
as in you personally?
you as in generally
Oh,
us."
okay. I was like, why you were single
Uh,
out? That was awesome.
I was one of the one of a small
Mhm.
number of us who were kind of like, do it. He was
Mhm. Mhm. Mhm.
and it was a struggle. We were kind of like, but we have no money, and it's like expensive to figure out, and it's difficult to do, and blah, blah, blah. And eventually, it was COVID that kind of forced us
Mhm.
to solve that problem. So we did a lot of online retreats, but it's not quite infinitely scalable because
Mm.
the experience, I would say, like the motor of the retreat, the thing that really generates the power of the transformation is live presence in small groups. So,
Mm.
like, we would have maybe one or two monastics per group of 20 people.
Mm.
And because there's not an infinite number of us, then that limits the number to about 1,000, usually, like from Plum Village, that we can reach in a single
Mm.
retreat. But we are looking into how we can take that a little bit further, because we have a big international community of trained practitioners and facilitators. Even if so, beyond the monastic community, there's tens of thousands of other people in our tradition um, who could facilitate those circles. So that's actually something that we're going to start doing in August, late August, is we're going to start creating
Awesome.
an online
Well,
course.
please let me and my viewers know this is something that, I'm down personally. I'm sure my viewers would be too. I do want to challenge the notion of not being scalable yet. All right.
Mm.
So I've done a Vipassana program. I don't know if you ever done with Goenkaji's version of Vipassana. So
No.
it's his teaching of him recording. Obviously, he's not alive, so it was his teaching. And then there is a meditator that would meditate with us. But the
Mm.
teaching part
Yeah.
is from Goenkaji from, I don't know, 80s or 70s or something like that. So back in the day. Just wanted to nudge you a little bit more on the possible scalability of the
Yeah.
teachings.
I think that's kind of how we'll do it. We're going to have teachings from Tai curated, and so maybe like a 10-week course or a 12-week course, something like that. And then there will be some live aspects as well, some Q&A sessions with us, or circle sharings, but facilitated not only by monastics but also by lay practitioners. Because then it can't, maybe not infinitely scalable, but we can go from 1,000 to 10,000 or
Mm,
100
mm.
quite easily.
A book you may want to check out, by the way,
Mm.
Brother Spirit. I know that I'm giving you unsolicited
No,
point,
no,
resources.
we're in an
So, like
expedition.
like Bruce Lee said, take what's useful, throw out what's not, and make it yours. So, if whatever doesn't land, throw it away. I don't mind. The book that you might want to look into is The Purpose Driven Church
Hmm.
by this mega church founder, Rick Warren. He
Mhm.
wrote a really famous book called The Purpose Driven Life.
Mhm.
He wrote another book called The Purpose Driven Coach. It's about the mechanics of how they built this massive church, international church. So you
Okay.
may want to look into that.
I'll check it out. Yeah,
Yeah,
for sure.
yeah. I think church. This is totally a side thing. It has a slightly different flavor
Mm,
of what a monastery. I
mm,
think I think people have this idea that monks ought to have a vow of poverty.
mm.
So people charge very little for the great service and the goodwill that in healing that you're helping people do. But I think, you know, as a conscious capitalist, I think maybe you could raise your price a little bit, so so that you can build the 12 million dollar worth of infrastructure, so that you can receive more people. You know,
We,
for all the.
we do have a vow of poverty. I mean, we live very, very simply as monastics. But we do also want to be able to, offer a retreat experience, which is it has to be up to code, for example. It has to be up to the European
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
standards
mm-hmm,
for feeding the public. And that just doing that is very expensive to be up to the fire code and,
mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
everything else, handicap accessibility and so on. So yeah, it's a question, and we're kind of actively looking into it. One thing that we can do is offer some kind of bespoke retreats to
mm-hmm,
to corporations and so on who can pay more, and
mm-hmm,
then may keep our retreats accessible to as many people as possible. So without raising the prices too much
mm-hmm,
for
mm-hmm,
so people can still come, because we're not interested in only serving a kind of wealthy clientele.
mm-hmm,
That would be counter to our kind of purpose and
mm-hmm,
mission.
mm-hmm,
Um, but there are maybe ways to have people who can support at a higher level, make it possible for everyone else to continue to come and have that experience. So it's happening.
mm-hmm.
But yeah,
Yeah, I
that's
mean,
definitely something I didn't expect as a monk. I was kind of like, wow, I'm going to be in a fundraiser. That's like
fundraiser,
across
setting prices,
now.
things like that.
Like managing a multi-million euro construction project.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Who
Not,
knew? Interesting how life takes you. In terms of governance, and then I'm interested in this not so much on the Plum Village as an example, but because you as a group are so successful in scaling transformation, awakening in the engaged monastic way that you are. What was the word I was going to ask? Oh, governance, right. So governance is always being challenging in conscious organization, because corruption is so easy, right?
yeah.
The guruship, the exploitation of students, and so on and so forth. So you seem to be doing well as a group collectively, and a very high level of integrity, and also operation wise worldwide and everything. How do you govern decision
Yeah.
making, allocation of resources, expansion, and all these decision making type things?
This is a very good question. So one thing is that Tai, when he was alive, did not consider himself the boss, the CEO, the leader. He was a teacher, but he didn't actually, it was kind of extraordinary. He didn't really involve himself in the day-to-day decision-making process, even though if he had, everybody would have said, yes, Tai, everybody would have just listened and gone, okay, whatever you want, boss, we got it. But he deliberately didn't do that, because he knew that if he made us dependent on him for all the decisions, then once he was gone, then the whole thing would fall apart. So he was
Mm-hmm.
looking much further ahead, and also relying on, I mean, you got to realize that the Buddhist monastic kind of organism, is very ancient. It's maybe one of the most ancient continuously existent organizations on the planet. And so it has built-in kind of protections for exactly this kind of thing. So one thing is consensus decision making. So in principle, for any important decisions, it has to be the council of bhikshus, or the council
Council
of
of what?
bhikshus are fully ordained monks, and
I see. Got it. Mm-hmm.
bhikshus are fully ordained nuns. So the
Mm-hmm.
Bhikshuni Council or the Bhikshu Council are the kind of decision-making bodies.
Mm.
Those decisions are taken by consensus. So it's kind of one person, one voice. It's very democratic. Everybody can speak. But it's this very, very interesting combination of democracy and hierarchy, because so everybody has a voice, but there's a recognition that those who have been in the monastic practice longer, so maybe somebody's been a monk for 30 years or 30, 40 years, just has a depth of insight and wisdom that it's going to be a little bit different from somebody who's just been practicing for 3 years.
Mm-hmm,
Right.
mm-hmm,
So somehow when that brother speaks, if he speaks, it carries a little extra weight. But there's no voting, right? So the idea is everybody has to arrive at consensus. That means everybody has a chance to share. And then there's a period of kind of listening to the whole community where you get to sort of feel like which way the community is leaning. And then the facilitator will say, okay, I'd like to propose this as a consensus. You have to have a skillful facilitator who can include enough of the different views that have been expressed to make sure everybody feels that they've been heard. And then if there's one or two people who really have a different view, they are basically invited, for the sake of harmony, to let go of their view. So you can't. So the problem in a voting system is that you always have some proportion of people who are disgruntled, and it's maybe up to 50%.
mm-hmm.
Unhappy, right? So that's not great for long-term harmony. Whereas with consensus, in principle, with every single decision that's made, you can only make the decision when everybody has agreed to it. Everybody kind of goes, okay, yes, this is the way we're going to go. And that relies on, the thing is that only works because everybody's meditating, everybody's everybody's recognizing their emotions. When they get triggered by something, by a view, they recognize like, oh, okay, this is touching something in my past. I'm getting triggered. I need to take care of my emotions. I need to calm myself down. I need to check my perception. Am I sure that that's what they're saying? Did I misunderstand? It relies on a very, very high level of kind of self-awareness of each member, and a depth of listening and presence, which is sadly maybe a little bit lacking in our current political arenas. But it's very beautiful. It's very powerful when we are able to do that. And you feel energized after a meeting like that, and I have the experience of going into a meeting really thinking like, okay, it has to go like this. But then once I've listened to my brothers, I can do a complete 180. I'm kind of like, oh, I really hadn't seen these other aspects. And I totally let go of my view, and I see things in a completely new way. And that's a wonderful thing. Like, I want that. I don't want to just be confirmed in my own view. That means I haven't learned anything. Like, if I can be wrong, then I've learned something. And that's a good thing. So I think it was very interesting that Tai actually let us, I kind of saw him. I felt like sometimes he let us make mistakes as an organization. He let us do things that he could see wouldn't work or would maybe cause a car crash, further down the line. But he let us do it because he knew that ultimately would allow us to grow and to learn and to get stronger. And that if he always intervened and said, no, you should really make this decision, then, it would just, we would be kind of infantilizing, and it would undermine the power of that Bhikshu council or Bhikshuni council. And
I
so,
am so interested in what the normally I'm not interested in like C-SPAN type of TV shows and watching the political process, but this sounds fascinating. I know it's obviously private and closed, but I love to just be a fly in the wall and just see how this meeting is conducted.
Yeah, no, it's a very special thing. And our abbot, Brother Phap is a master at this. Like, we were very, very lucky. Like, he became a monk when he was 13. And so he's really steeped in this tradition, and he has a great skill in including all the views, making everybody feel that what their sharing has been heard and recognized and included in the consensus, in the synthesis of views. You can find some stuff on his podcast about that.
He has a podcast.
Yeah, The Way Out is in.
Okay, I will check him out. Thank you.
Check it out. Yeah, it's wonderful.
Amazing. Do you mind if we do some rapid fire questions? I know the nature of our conversation isn't rapid fire, but we're gonna try to do a little more rapid fire.
No.
Is that cool?
Yep.
So, what attracted you in the very beginning of monastic life or coming to meditation retreats is the possibility of superpowers, right? ESPs, extrasensory powers. And then you hear that a lot in other traditions, right? You touch, third eye here and you see your past lives or whatever the lore may be. Having been practicing since 2008, what would you say, a long time practitioner, the quote unquote superpower it will give you?
Well, I think there are many, but one is to be comfortable with discomfort. Yeah, I think we may think about attaining happiness or peace or something like that as being like a constant state of bliss, but in fact I don't think that's what it is. Happiness is just accepting things as they are and being okay with that, having a kind of equanimity with suffering, with pain, with discomfort, and discovering maybe that discomfort or suffering or pain is not actually discomfort, suffering, or pain. It might be just to do with our way of conceiving it, our way of perceiving it, our way of perceiving ourselves. And so it's this kind of like capacity to touch into happiness in the present moment, which is a kind of profound okayness with things just as they are, even if, like, on another level, things might not be as you would ideally wish them to be, but you're kind of still okay with it. I think that's something that I see more and more from in my experience.
Beautiful. I love it. Quick share. 2022 has been a pivotal year for me because I started to sit with ayahuasca with indigenous leaders, and one of their core teaching is the phrase "solegria," which means only joy. So that's just over and over again, solegria, solegria, during a very intense ayahuasca, journeys and up and down, and I'm learning as a human to have joy, no matter what level of intensity it may be, high or low, doesn't matter. Just even I'm stuck in traffic or my rental car has been delayed 4 hours, just only joy, only joy, only joy.
That's what the Buddha called. He said this phrase, "Drista Dhamma Sukha Vihara," which means dwelling happily in the present moment. So drista is actually the verb. The root of the verb is to see. So it's kind of drista. Dhamma is phenomena. So it's the phenomena which are now, that which is now being seen. Sukha, happiness. Vihara, dwelling. So it's like dwelling happily in that which is now being seen, which is a kind of proxy for what is being heard, felt, tasted, smelled, cognized. So it's like the present moment. It is always possible to dwell happily in the present moment. That's kind of like that's the gem in the heart of lotus. That's the secret, which is very strange because we conceive of happiness in our culture completely differently. We usually think of happiness as which comes to us once, this, or only when that. Only if not this,
Mhm.
once this is
Mhm.
finished, or once I have completed this, once I have achieved that, once I have become this, once I've got rid of that, once I'm away from that person, and once I'm with that other person, once I have this, always deferred, right? Happiness always
Mhm.
later, once something. And of course, it never comes, because all we
Mhm.
have is this one
Mhm.
moment. And so the trick is to realize that, because when I heard my teacher, sharing that, and he would say, well, the Buddha said, Drista Dhamma Sukha Vihara, it is possible to dwell happily in the present moment. I would always say to myself, but how? Like, when is he going to tell us how it's possible?
Mm.
Right? And then at a certain moment, I realized, well, if there's a how, if there's something that you have to do, then it's not the present moment.
Mm.
Right? If there's a
Okay.
how, then it's in the future, because it's like, after I've done the how, then I'll be happy.
Mm.
So the secret is, there is no how, right? Because it's already now.
It's one of the truisms that it's impossible to refute, but it makes the mind crazy.
Absolutely. It should.
Just be here now, and get the only joy in this moment.
Yeah, it's very, very annoying.
It makes the mind go crazy.
I have a headache, or, but I have trauma, or, but like,
Yeah, yeah.
terrible stuff happened to me, or, but I'm in debt, or it's like, yeah, and
Yeah. Definitely a longer talk. So speaking of rapid fire, let me get back on track on that.
sorry.
All right. No, it's perfect. I love our conversation. So what about you and I, we met from Rome Research. You embrace modern technology. You embrace reading scientific paper and citing scientific paper. So you are obviously a practitioner of meditation practices, but you also have practices that hone your mind
Mm.
using, Rome Research and so on and so forth. Reconcile for us how, maybe this is not a rapid fire question, but how do you hone your mind and at the same time still being present?
Mm. Well, I would put it differently. I'd say, like, being present, learning to be present is honing the mind.
Okay.
That's the honing the mind. Because that's the, like I was saying right at the beginning, that's the fundamental mind skill, is
Mm,
presence and concentration and stability of attention. And all meditation ultimately is about developing that stability of attention,
mm,
and about the possibility of choosing what it is that we attend to, and how long we can stay with that object of contemplation. Because usually, like, if you decide to think about something, what happens is the mind wanders. You may be thinking about it for a few seconds, and then your mind, wanders off somewhere. You may, like, if you pick up a leaf on the path and you say, I'm going to contemplate this leaf and try to understand, the nature of the interconnection of the leaf and the tree and the clouds and the cosmos, but after a while, a few seconds, probably you're thinking about something else. But if, as a meditator, you have the capacity to pick an object of contemplation and stay with it. So that's the fundamental mind skill. And then all the other stuff, like Rome Research and the technology, I see it as kind of like any other tool, in the sense that, like a knife, a knife can cut, but it can cut you as well. It can kill, but it can also serve. Like, it can be very, very helpful, harmless, if skillfully used, but it can also do a lot of damage. So I think all technology is a little bit like that. A phone, can be an instrument of total destruction and distraction. But if you use it skillfully, maybe it can be an instrument of connection, and, like, you can reconcile with somebody. Maybe tonight, you can call somebody you thought that you would never be able to speak to again, and just forgive them, or, be able to really listen to their voice. again, you know. And I see that happen like every retreat. There's kind of the miracle of reconciliation happens, and we often tell people, it's like use your telephone, like call them tonight, don't wait, you know, while you are feeling this love and openness, like reach out, connect. But they're very difficult to handle. Like technology sometimes is taking us, you know, my teacher told this story. Sorry, this is not the rapid fire kind of
No, it's
question.
great. No, go for it. Yeah.
He gave a talk, actually, a very important talk. He was invited to Google in 2011 and 2013. And so he gave talks there for the Google employees. And then when he came back to Plum Village, he gave a talk, I think in 2014, which he called Technology is the Horse. You know, so then he tells this story, which is an old Chinese story, I think, you know, about a guy who's riding on the back of a horse very fast. You know, the horse is galloping along, and there's a guy on the side of the lane who says, "Hey, where are you going?" And he says, "I don't know, ask the horse." Right? Out of control. The horse is going. And Tai is saying, well, technology is the horse. And we think that we know where we're going, but sometimes, you know, we're just doing things because we can, and we're just, you know, creating innovations because they're possible, and, you know, because we're curious and because we can, maybe not always asking ourselves what the ethical implications are. Like, you know, I know very well some of the people who were involved in the, you know, the very small team that created the iPhone, and they've shared with me that, in a sense, they have a kind of they feel a moral responsibility to kind of account for some of the harm. You know, when they go to a restaurant and they see a family, a mother, father, and two children are all looking at iPhones instead of talking to each other, you know, they're realizing, like, wow, that's not what we intended, and yet that's what happened. You know, you've given people, you know, this kind of irresistible, addictive thing, this kind of slot machine that they have in their pocket, and they just keep scrolling. And I think that, so what they told me is that what they didn't foresee was the dimension of social media. You know, because I think they were working very closely with Steve Jobs, and they said that for him it was quite sentimental. It was kind of like, give people their memories, give people their photos, so they can always have their photos, and give people their music, you know, their emotions, so they can always have their music and always have their photos and always be in touch with their loved ones. And that's a beautiful vision. But they didn't foresee that on this platform you would then have Facebook and all other social media and this kind of infinite scroll. And so, yeah, they are now actively engaged in creating another kind of technology, which they believe will take us off the screens and more into life and interaction. But it's top secret, and I'm not allowed to tell you about it. So
that's okay. I wish him success. It feels like this is about to go into a non-rapid fire question. Well, okay. We care about waking people up and transformation, you know, provide them more healing and recovery and transcendence, all the beautiful things that we as human beings are, and what's within our reach, right? However, I'm curious to know your thoughts. How do we work with the ego? What the ego wants? The ego wants significance, you know, validation. How could we create a game that goes with what the ego desires and also give them what they need as well, versus just telling or appeal to the higher self, hey, this is a game of no win situation, like stop doing this, be more present here now. You know what I mean? Could you give it back to me how you receive it, so we can maybe fine tune the question a bit?
So I would say that we maybe have a perception ethical conduct, like really like deeply ethical conduct, is kind of boring or dull, or it wouldn't be very fun. It's like just eating oatmeal all day long. It's like,
I like oatmeal. Yeah.
yeah, I like oatmeal too. Actually, oatmeal's but but I think, as you go forward on the path of practice, maybe what you discover, what I feel like I'm discovering, is that ethical conduct is a relief. It's a refuge. It's a peaceful, joyful, happy place, because in that moment that I'm not causing any harm to myself or to anyone else, I can. It's like that's happiness. That is happiness in that moment, because we're very sensitive beings. Like, we don't want to cause harm. We really don't. And yet, pulled by our desires and our craving for fame, success, wealth, riches, sex, and so on, we do cause harm, and sometimes a lot, to ourselves with our various addictions, and to others around us. Like, we sacrifice our relationships sometimes for our career. We sacrifice our dreams for security. We sacrifice our friends for money. Most people who win the lottery end up miserable and regret ever having won it, because it tears them apart. It tears their friendships apart, because suddenly everything is distorted by the presence of that inequality, of that large amount of money. It doesn't help in the way that they think it does, or that they think it would. So it's kind of the realization that not doing harm is the reward. That's the happiness already. It's not, and again, it's not in the future, it's now. When I think of my ancestors, it's a practice that we have in our tradition, is to realize that our ancestors are all present within us, right? So my father, my mother, my grandparents, but not only my genetic lineage, but my kind of mentorship lineage, right? All my teachers are in me. My cello teachers, my piano teachers, my composition teachers, my teachers in the spiritual path, my mathematics teachers, they've all touched me and influenced me and shaped me. And not only that, but all my kind of biological ancestry, beyond even the human, but the non-human realms, all the food systems that we're connected into, the air that we breathe, we're like completely enmeshed. And when I think back, I see like some of my ancestors struggled with exactly this. They wanted things, and those desires caused them sometimes to do harm, right? To hurt themselves and to hurt those around them. And sometimes it's like a cycle that repeats, and like when your father is hard on you, and then you end up being hard on your own children, and it's hard, like, why am I'm repeating the same pattern? And yet we do, like, trauma is passed down generation to generation to generation. And so the moment that we get to say stop, if we, as practitioners, as recipients of spiritual lineages that give us the tools to handle those habits and stop them, to handle that suffering and embrace it and heal it and transform it, we are very lucky, because maybe we're the first in the lineage to be able to say, I don't have to be pushed by my desire. I can say stop, and I can celebrate that in this moment, even after many, many generations of habit and doing harm, I'm in this moment not doing harm. And that is a win, not just for me, but for the whole lineage. Like, my grandfather in that moment can celebrate, like, because it's not wanted. Like, he didn't want to hurt anyone, but he did out of his habits. And so when I can stop, he also gets to stop.
Mm-hmm.
And that happiness kind of resonates all the way up the lineage. And so that's the reward.
I love it. Is there any last idea, last thought that, I know we cover a lot of ground in our conversation. Is there any last thought that Hesuke really wanted to drive this home to your viewers, to your listeners?
Well, I think, one very big thing that's on the horizon, I think, for the whole of humanity right now is the climate crisis and the many intersecting crises of poverty, inequality, social injustice, and racism, sexism, discrimination against, gender, diversity, all, the full kind of spectrum of the rainbow of humanity, all these different types of injustice that we're facing with the collapse of our life support system on this planet, potentially accelerating kind of effects that we're seeing, the heat waves, the floods, the fires, the storm surges, the hurricanes. There's a sense, I think, especially for the for younger people, maybe people in their teens, and in their 20s, that like, what is my future? What does my future look like? I know there's people thinking like, why should I bother, finishing my education when I don't know if there's going to be a society in which I can get a job, in 20 years. Like, what's the point of having a family, or is it even just to have a child when, the world I'm going to bring this child into maybe is going to be a lot less diverse and rich and beautiful than the world I was born into. Maybe there's 1 million species facing extinction. We're already seeing wars brought on by climate stress, and there's probably likely going to be more. There's going to be displacement of populations. We're already seeing climate migrants. Parts of the world are going to become fairly uninhabitable, more and more uninhabitable, and maybe quicker than we realize. And those people are going to look for somewhere else to live. And then our political systems are going to be strained by that. They'll probably drift to the right, fear, closing borders, increasing nationalism, fear of immigration, fear of refugees. All of that could happen. I think it's actually quite likely to happen. So how can we know that? And to the extent that we know it, right? Of course, it's all a little bit. There's some projection, speculation. We don't know exactly, but the writing's on the wall. I mean, the trends are pretty stark. How can we be with that and not fall into despair and Buddhism? How can we still touch joy in every moment, happiness in every moment? Like, how do those things fit together? Knowing what we know, knowing that life is maybe going to get very difficult, and we may see human suffering on a scale that we've never before seen. Not even the Second World War. That's like millions of people dying. This could be hundreds of millions. This could be, really, really, really tough. How do we face that? How do we hold that? And how do we still take the action that we can take, right? And not become indifferent or numb or frozen or stuck or go into panic or despair. That's a question that I face a lot for myself, and many, many people come to us and with that kind of question. And so, yeah, it's important for me, thank you for the opportunity. I feel like it's very important.
But are you writing a book, by the way, on that? Because you raised a really valid point.
Yeah.
We don't just want to lead people there. Are you writing a book on that? Are you starting a series of talks on it?
Yeah, so I can say a few things. So first of all, there's a wonderful book that just came out last year called Zen and the Art of Saving the Planet by Thich Nhat Hanh. preface to True Dedication, wrote a commentary, and it's a wonderful, wonderful book. So it contains, really all his deepest teachings on the environment, climate crisis, situation of our world. So whatever I say, in a sense, is coming from that body of teaching as well. And we, all of us young Dharma teachers, we continue to try to enrich that strand of teaching and to offer talks that are relevant to that. So probably, most of my talks on YouTube, at some point or other, I'm relating to that kind of awareness, that the anxiety that dwells within us, as a result of that knowledge. So what I would say, right, not to leave people empty-handed in the face of that, because I know it's very heavy, right? It's very like, wow, it's very painful to know that we are co-responsible also for, this world that we live in. We're still participating in the destruction, right? We still use cars and planes and trains and energy producing systems that are, dependent on fossil fuels. And we still use plastic packaging and all of these things. Like, what can we do? So I would say, one thing that I'm very focused on is that we need to face the possibility of our own extinction. It's kind of like facing our own death, right? We know we're going to die, right? We don't think about it very much, but actually to think about it, to contemplate our own death every day is very empowering, because it makes, the life that we have very precious. We have to realize, like, the moments that we have still alive on this planet are very, very precious, because one day we will die. But that's also true at the level of our civilization. Like, our civilizations end, right? They all civilizations before us have risen and had a period of prosperity, and then have come to an end one way or another. And our civilization is no different. At some point, it will collapse. Whether that's in 50 years, 100 years, or 1,000 years, or 1,000,000 years, we don't know. But it's very important psychologically to kind of accept that possibility, and to see that to find some serenity with our own death, but also with our collective death, maybe the extinction of humanity. It's very difficult, but if you can zoom out sufficiently to a kind of galactic timescale or universal timescale, you see that, well, okay, so the Earth is like a flower in the garden of the galaxy, and it has this beautiful flower, rich abundance of life, and human life is only one part of that, and the Earth will continue even if we as humanity are wiped out by our own greed and stupidity. The Earth will bring forth other species, and maybe that what it is that that is us, there's something that's inextinguishable. There's something that will always be carried forward, transmitted, communicated, even if it's in a different form with different species. Life continues. And so I find serenity in that. And what that allows me to do is to touch peace and freedom, what we call the ultimate dimension. It's like seeing eternity in this present moment. Like, you see that we participate in the lifespan of the cosmos, not only our own lifespan. Like, we're part of something much, much, much bigger, which goes beyond humanity. Like, we're not so self-important, like humanity is just one aspect of what we are. Right? Our body, this is only like a tiny fragment of what we really are. We are also this. We are the world. The environment is not outside of you, it is you. And the environment is not just this planet, but it's the whole cosmos. When you realize that you are the cosmos, well, the extinction of this body, this species, this civilization doesn't matter so much. But that doesn't make you indifferent, and it doesn't mean that you don't do anything. What it does is it gives you the freedom from the panic and the despair, then to get back into the historical dimension and stay engaged and stay in action. But you act with the freedom of eternity, right? And with the urgency of the present moment. Right? So we don't want to act with panic and make the situation worse, but we want to act with this abundance of peace and serenity and freedom, because maybe then our actions will have a better impact and be a little bit more sensible. So then when you come to the action part, okay, this is it, right? The last part, the last thing I will say, right? We know that in the situation of the climate, there are three key things that have to happen, right? We have to have mitigation, which means we have to stop polluting, we have to stop emitting greenhouse gases, we have to stop doing the harm, right? We have to mitigate the harm. Then we have to have adaptation, which means that we have to adapt our infrastructure, we have to adapt, our food production, we have to adapt our cities, we have to adapt everything to be able to live on a hotter planet with more violent weather events, stronger heat waves and fire and flood and all the rest. Mitigation, adaptation. Everybody's talking about mitigation and adaptation. And then, but there's a third part, which is human resilience. Who is going to do the mitigation and the adaptation is people. And if those people are overwhelmed by basically, climate trauma, the trauma of seeing other people, maybe millions or tens of millions of people dying or being displaced or being in situations of war, maybe they themselves being in situations of war, they themselves being displaced, it's traumatizing. I mean, even just the thought that we might be wiped out can be traumatizing, the anxiety that can bring up. So if everybody's frozen, in overwhelm or trauma, or if they're panicking, then they're not going to do any mitigation and they're not going to do any adaptation, because they're going to be freaking out, or just paralyzed. And so I think this is the kind of, like, when I look at, this, what I have received, what we have received as a tradition, the kind of lineage of teachings that we belong to, I think that's where we can really contribute. We can help people to build human resilience. We can help. It's basically trauma therapy at scale. It's kind of like, okay, we need to teach people how to handle the panic, the overwhelm in themselves, first of all, how to be okay with that, like comfort with the discomfort, right? Feeling joy in the present moment, happiness in the present moment, even though things are bad, right? Even when things are really bad, to still be able to touch freedom and peace. And then teach them also to be able to help others who are facing those overwhelming feelings of despair, panic, and anxiety. So you're kind of training the trainers. You first you have to take care of yourself, and then you help the people around you to take care of themselves, and then you learn how to train them as well to help others, and then it spreads and it scales. And I think that's what could maybe make a real difference. And that gives me the kind of sense of urgency of the collective awakening as well, because if we really can become a more compassionate society, a more awake society, a wiser society, one in which there's a deeper understanding of how to generate a feeling of joy in every moment. And there's a deeper understanding of how to take care of a feeling of pain, a feeling of overwhelm, a feeling of despair in every moment. And those two things are linked, right? Because if you know how to generate a feeling of joy, then actually your joy starts to take care of your pain, right? So they're not really separate. And if you can take care of your pain, well, then you have a lot more joy. And understand, especially you have compassion, because once, if you are tender and vulnerable and able to contact and to feel your own pain, then you will not be indifferent to the pain of others, and you'll be sensitive to it, and you will care. You will want to help, and that's the kind of society I'd like to live in, and I think that's the kind of society as well that can navigate the various crises that we're in more skillfully and maybe even avoid them. But it's kind of like we're getting down to the wire. It is urgent. It's urgent that we all wake up, because time is running out if we're going to save this civilization of ours. I think it's possible. I'm very hopeful about that, because I see, wherever I go, I see collective awakening. I see people going on retreats. I see people taking care of themselves, people wanting to behave more ethically, take responsibility for their consumption, their production, their way of life, their relationships. So I see a lot of reasons for hope, for optimism. And I feel a lot of, I get a lot of energy from that, the sense that this makes a difference, like teaching people how to take care of themselves. And how do I teach them? Is by doing it myself. If I can't, then there's nothing to teach. I really have to be honest with myself. Like, how well am I taking care of my own suffering, my own emotions, my own, ups and downs? And if I'm doing that, then I think I have something to share with others, and I see it making a difference. And I say I, but it's really we. It's like collectively. Plum Village, I really, see the people who come on retreat. They maybe come with a lot of tension around their eyes, anxiety, things are burdening them. After 5 days or a week, they're glowing, they're fresh, they're full of joy and life and love. And those waves are going out into the world, week after week after week, after every retreat, and 1,000 people, another 1,000, another 1,000, they're going out. And they're touching, people in their families, in their places of work, in their schools, communities. So I think it's happening. The collective awakening is well underway, and I thank you also for being a part of that.
Brother Spirit, thank you for such a rich conversation. Beyond the content, beyond your stories, beyond the details of how you collectively run this beautiful organization called Plum Village, I really get your presence. I really get your commitment. I really get the work that you're doing, first of all, to yourself, but second of all, caring for everyone that you interact with, right? The conscientiousness, the intentionality is very palpable. So your teacher, you're definitely a disciple of your teacher, the way you describe him. So thank you for the work that you do personally, as well as what Plum Village is up to. And for those of you that are inspired by Brother Spirit's words, his teachings, and what he's up to in as a way to impact the planet, right, at scale, trauma therapy at scale, as he calls it, go to plumvillage.org and go to Thich Nhat Hanh foundation.org/donate. They could use your support. So
Definitely.
yes, thank you so much for being here.
But the main support, if you do want to connect and support us, the main thing that you can do is just take a moment to come back, to stop what you're doing, and take 3 mindful breaths in and out, and just enjoy the sensation of being alive. Enjoy your in-breath. Smile with your out-breath. You recognize that you are still alive. You have a body. You can still hopefully see, hear, smell, taste, touch, be close to your loved ones. There's still so much to celebrate and to enjoy. Sometimes we just need to take a little pause. So that's the way you can support really what we're doing, is just by bringing a little bit more awareness and mindfulness into your life, and sharing that with others.
But don't forget, donate. Yes, do that and donate. All right.
Yeah.
Until we meet again, thank you so much.